I think one of the big things that we're sold when we become mothers is to be a good mother means you sacrifice all of yourself for your child. And when you do that, then you are considered a good mother. You put yourself last, you feed yourself last, you be the martyr, you do everything for everybody until you finally reach a tipping point.
Hi, and welcome to the Wearing Your Worth podcast. My name is Sarah Gale, and I'm the host of this podcast and the founder of Wearing Your Worth. In this podcast, we unpack what it is to really understand the relationship with our clothes and how it informs our style on a day-to-day basis. So today, I'm really excited about the episode we're about to enter into. We have as a guest one of my favorite people, and I have such a smile on my face when I say that, because I've known Lael Stone now for probably 30 odd years. I was working that out. Lael Stone is an expert in the parenting arena. So she's a TEDx speaker, an author of several books. She runs workshops, mentorships, and she's also the co-creator of Woodline Primary, which is an innovative school based on emotional wellbeing and intelligence. What we're going to do today is really dive into what it is to be a mum, and to understand some of the imprints that we can carry as a mum. And then we're going to look at how does that correlate to the wardrobe and some of the patterns that I find there as well. So, welcome, Lael. So great to have you here. As we were talking about before we came online, it's like, I actually don't know exactly where this conversation is going to go, but I know it's a conversation that's really rich because it comes up in my work a lot. And I work with a lot of mums and really about so many of the imprints that are carried through from childhood through teenage to early adult, like those imprints that we find, the emotional states that we then translate into our wardrobe. I'd love to speak to you about what you see and what might be useful to mums out there.
Yeah, it's a kind of a big topic. It's a bit of a Pandora's box, actually, when you start to dive in and go, what is this and what does it mean? So, I'll probably start with the way that I describe imprints, and everybody's kind of got a different take on it. But how I describe imprints is they're a belief system or story that we take on board as children and believe to be true. And we have imprints around everything. So I always start with, when you're a little child and you're born into this family or you have caregivers, you spend, the first 10, 15, even longer years of your life watching what happens in your family. And that is often where we create stories and belief systems around how the world works. So we have imprints on everything. Let's start with something like relationships, right? We watch our parents or our caregivers. We watch the way they talk to each other, the way they touch each other, the way they respond to each other. So we might grow up in a house where our parents just yell at each other, and that becomes an imprint of this is what relationship is. You yell when you get passionate, or, if you care about something, then this is the way you communicate. Equally, you might watch in your family of origin that when something big goes on, your parents just turn away from it. They don't talk about it. We push it under the rug. And the imprint becomes when something difficult arises, we bury it. We don't talk about it. We pretend it hasn't happened. That happens a lot in many families, let me just tell you. We have imprints around money. We have imprints around food. We have imprints around work and career. We have imprints around caring for ourselves, self-care, huge one for mothers. We have imprints around boundaries. We have imprints around body image. We have imprints on everything. And often what I find is really fascinating about this is we have these imprints that we take on board from our childhood, and we actually often aren't even aware of them. And what happens is they just turn up in the behaviors that we exhibit day to day. They turn up in the relationships we have as adults, and they can 100% turn up in our parenting, because often the way we were parented is usually the way we parent. So we either swing really far to the opposite side and go, I'll never do how it was done to me, or we often copy what was done, often unconsciously. And the part that I think is very interesting about imprints is we will often stay loyal to these imprints. So we will often carry them through because it means that we belong in our family. So we can have positive and negative imprints. So let me just say, for example, let's just talk about food for a minute, because food is something that people often relate to. You could have grown up in a family where food was a source of celebration and connection. So everybody came together on Sunday, you had a big roast, everyone brought some food to share, there was beautiful conversation around the table, there was storytelling, it was joyous. Everybody loved, what you cooked. We talked about how it was made. There was a celebration and a joy around food, right? And that became your imprint. And for many people, that's a beautiful imprint that they carry further into life, right? Their love of food and community and getting together, all the things. Equally, you could have grown up with an imprint around food, which is food was seen as control. So you had to eat everything on your plate. You had to eat whatever you were given. Perhaps as a child, you were really sensitive. You didn't like that. So food became a part of conflict in the family. Perhaps what also came with food is comment about people's weight and their bodies. So that became a story that you held onto. So your imprint around food may not have been a good one. And that may look like as you grow up, and you get older, you may have a really tricky relationship with food, which we know a lot of people do. So food is one, also equally things like success, so for some people, success in their family of origin, the imprint was you are only successful if you are the best, which means you must get the best grades at school, you have to get in a good course at university, and then you must get a really high paying job, and then you are deemed successful. And in some families, the price of belonging is success. So at all costs, you have to succeed to belong in your family. And on some level, people can say, well, that could be a good imprint because, it made me work hard. Yes, it could be, but not at the cost of your sense of self and the truth of who you are, right? So we've got lots of nuances in it. Equally, some people can be born into a family where what is their story around belonging is to not be successful, is to be just pretty average. And so if you are born into a family where we're working class, this is how we do it. And then you were to excel, or perhaps you got a scholarship somewhere, then often the narrative can be, well, who do you think you are? You're smarter than all of us, right? And all of a sudden we're like, oh, I have to dumb myself down in order to belong in this family, right? Because the mission to belonging in our family is we don't thrive. Right. So we see that in relationships. We can see that in success. We can see it in money. We can see it in the way we look as well. So imprints is, to me, a bit of a window into our sense of self. It is also a window into the stories and belief systems we carry. And what's so fascinating about imprints is a lot of the stories we make up, they aren't even true. They are just stories we've made up when we were children to keep ourselves safe. And then we look for evidence that those stories are true as we travel through life. And then we get to adulthood. And then often when we bump up against stuff, whether it's about how we look, whether it's about not being able to be financially free, whether it's about success, whether it's in relationships, it's often when we bump up against these things that we begin to understand, or maybe take a look at, what is the story I have running here around this thing? So for me, I love it because it's like a little snapshot into somebody's world as to where they stay stuck and where they are loyal to. And I love that we're having this conversation because the work that you do is a similar kind of window into who people are. And I think that you doing it with clothing and also with just really getting people to tune into how they feel, there are, I think, so many layers and stories that are connected to that around, where we can actually be free and who we get to be, or are we going to be loyal to our family of origin and those imprints that have raised us?
Okay, that's so beautiful, and I have so many things brimming right now. The interesting part that I see as well is those imprints. Sometimes we don't know that they're the things that are driving us because we're so used to, and this is what I see in the wardrobe, we're so used to hiding ourselves on some level. Yeah. And we're so disconnected from who actually am I because the identity that we've attached ourselves to, probably based on a coping strategy of some sort early on, is still evident, but it feels so much like us because it's who we've believed ourselves to become. And so even just in a couple of things that you talked about success, it's so interesting that often when I see that there's been this success measure, or especially if there's like, you can't be too much in success. One of the hidden style essences. So for the listeners, what I do is I look at patterns and programs in people that people are playing out with their wardrobe. So the unconscious and subconscious belief patterns that are driving their dressing decisions. And then we come under that and we find their 3 style essences, which are 3 creative characteristics that once all aligned in the one outfit brings you into the essence of you. It's like your heart and soul. It's like your true expression. And what I found is, like, when you talked about success and not being too successful because you're going to break out of that family pattern, often one of the essences is either showy or glamorous. Like, it's fascinating because, and it's almost like, can I really be this big? Can I be this much? And when we look at Australia and the tall poppy syndrome, it actually comes up a lot. And I often find it's either that group or it might be the elegance style group. It either come from country backgrounds. It's fascinating because then they come into the city and it's almost like I can't outshine my family in the country arenas. If there's been some money issues around that and some scarcity growing up, it's like, no, I can't be too much and I can't be too big. So they tend to kind of play themselves down and hide themselves in their wardrobes. And that might look like saying things like, I just don't care what I wear, or it becomes down to practicality.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes into that very masculine sense of it needs to be efficient.
Yes.
Yep. Now, I'm really curious because a pattern I come up against with mums a lot is around, it's almost, and I think you touched on it with self-care, so I'd love to dive into that. What I see a lot of is it's like, I don't have time, and it's almost like a guilt factor if they start to think about what they're going to wear. It feels like a luxury. They say, what fits, what's easy, and what's clean, that's what I put on. And I say to them, how do you feel in that? They look at me blankly and it's like, well, awful, but I've just got things to do. So we become very doing rather than being. So, and I think this is part of the self-care. So what do you see in mums around that self-care? If you stand in front of your wardrobe and feel frustrated, overwhelmed, or like you have a wardrobe full of clothes and nothing to wear, this is for you. I've created a free download that takes you on a personal journey into your wardrobe like never before. You'll discover insights about your own choices of clothes that you may have never considered. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. So this is where the transformation begins. Head to wearingyourworth.com and download it for free today.
Yeah, it's very entangled. Let me just start with that. And I think that I understand as a mum, I've had 3 kids. I understand that narrative. I understand that it just has got to come 6 down the list because there's all these things I have to do. So I think one of the big things that we're sold when we become mothers is to be a good mother means you sacrifice all of yourself for your child. And when you do that, then you are considered a good mother. Now, we also watched our mothers and our grandmothers do that. So that has been the imprint that's been passed down from many generations. You put yourself last, you feed yourself last, you be the martyr. I mean, that's a really strong one in many different ways, which is you do everything for everybody until you finally reach a tipping point and then you just seethe underneath the surface and then, maybe you blow up and then it kind of resets again. But many, many women are martyrs because that's what we've been taught. That's what our mothers and our grandmothers did. But really, I think one of the big things I see is that we don't have a sense of taking care of ourselves and our self-care because it is all about, if you're a good mother, you meet everybody else's needs first. And we know that that does not work, right? Because we know that when a woman isn't taking care of herself, she becomes burnt out, she's resentful, she's short, she isn't able to meet her kids in the way she wants, she definitely doesn't want to have sex with her partner. Like, it doesn't serve the whole. I mean, it serves the patriarchy. It's been around for a long time because really what it serves is women, you just do everything and get on with it. But we're actually at a time now where I think we're realizing this actually isn't working, and we can't do it all because even, if we think back generations ago, whether it was our mother or our grandmothers would just look after the home a lot of the time. They weren't working a second job. They weren't trying to make sure their house looked good on Instagram. They were just, trying to keep food on the table and take care of the kids, right? So on one level, they were just focused on that task and they could probably do it. And yes, also at the same time, they probably didn't meet their needs. And then our mother's generation, they started working a bit more, so we added more load to it. And then women these days, we're working 2 and 3 full-time jobs, like one being at home with the children, the other one just the management of life, and then we may be doing paid work as well. So there's a lot going on. So it makes sense why we're like, oh, it doesn't matter what I wear. It's got to be functional just to get through the day. But my big thing that I often talk to women about, and, they come to me when they're struggling in mothering. So they're either yelling a lot or, they're just not enjoying it, or whether they're feeling very disconnected in their physical relationships. And the first question I always ask is, where's your self-care, or what's your relationship to self-care? And I give people on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is my self-care is absolutely non-negotiable. I really honor it. This is what I'm doing. And a lot of people, they sit maybe down at 1 or 2, or they sit kind of around the 4 or 5 mark, right? And so then the question I often ask them is, okay, that's good. Before we kind of go into the imprint, if you did have really great self-care, like if you were at 9 out of 10, what would then happen? What's the story that goes on in your head? And the stories are often this: I feel guilty. I will be seen as lazy. If I have self-care for me, then my partner's going to need self-care, and that's going to put more load on myself. I'm afraid if I stop, what will actually come up? And so all of these stories, they kind of sit there around, if I was to actually have self-care, these are the things that, might happen, which are just stories. And then I often ask, and where does that story come from? Who's around when we talk about self-care? And everyone's like, it's my mom, it's my auntie, it's my grandmother, it's my stepmother. It's usually the women in our lives who have modeled to us probably lack of self-care on some level. And so we often know that we need self-care, but our stories and our imprints around us stop us from doing that, because it really means challenging those narratives that we've had there. And so I think the thing is, what I have really worked with within myself and to model to my daughters, and what I talk to women about all the time, is that we are all better humans when we take care of our needs. Like, we know this. We know the whole put the oxygen mask on first. But what do you want to model to your children? What do you want your sons and daughters' imprints around self-care to be? Because they are watching you. What do you want them to see when they look at you, the way you take care of yourself, the way you nurture yourself, the way you honor yourself, because they are learning to do that by witnessing you in these moments. So I often look at it that where we are, one of the most important things we can do firstly is to turn and look backwards and go, what was the story I have taken on board from where I was raised, right? So, and then once we realize, oh man, the reason why I can't do this is because that's the story I carry. I mean, for me personally, I come from a family of powerhouse women. They are amazing. They just do amazing stuff in the world. But the narrative that I took on board was, unless you're doing 3 things at once, you are lazy. And then I became a mum, and of course I was exhausted and strung out. And, when I'd go to sit down, the voice in my head is, don't be lazy. So I'd jump up and I would keep on going. And I'm very good, very, very good at that. I've achieved many things because that belief system has kind of fired me. But at the same time, it's made me burn out a lot of times. It's made me not be the mother I wanted to be. And I really had to work hard to change that story of actually self-care is actually an act of self-love. Like, the kindest thing I can give my children is to take care of me. That is a gift. And so to me, when we, especially when it comes to our appearances and our clothing, like, for me, that really ties in with this self-care piece of our belief around what we're worthy of, our belief around loving ourselves enough. Like, all of those pieces, I think, really tie in together.
That's beautiful. And touching on those pieces, it's like our energetic embodiment changes when we're not in our patterns compared to when we're in our patterns. So whether we're driven by our unconscious or whether we're driven by our conscious. And what I'm hearing you say is that the self-care that you talk about is through that programming. And so our level of self-care often is derivative of that level of programming, like you talked about. And I know your family too. So I can see that, right? In the sense of, yeah, it's the achievement and it's how busy I am. And otherwise, oh my God, forbid that I am lazy and I actually sit down and just have some time out, and time out to me. If we're getting dressed in a way that doesn't honor who we really are, and it doesn't take longer to get dressed that way. It just takes an awareness to know, what would that be? So what
Yes.
are those essences? And once we're in them, I've had parents come back and say, I'm so much more present with my children and I have compassion that I didn't have before. And that happens because when we're aligned inside, our whole energy shifts. So self-care comes into, and I do like to see the wardrobe almost like a wardrobe wellbeing, because it does hold that self-care piece. And if we say, well, I don't care, I don't believe that. Because one, they wouldn't be talking to me in a conversation if they didn't have any care, right? Because that's how it is. And two, when our appearance has been so drummed into us as women, I don't care is I can't find my way through this.
Mhm.
So I'm going to tell myself that I don't care.
Mhm.
And then I can really kind of pretend that piece and then put myself up on a bit of a pedestal that says I'm higher above what I look like.
Mhm.
And I think we'd all love to really not care what we look like. Like in the
Mm.
big scheme of things, self-love really does come down to that thing. I love myself regardless, right?
Mhm.
And as we age, we find out about, well, let me own that. I'm 61 at this point in time. And over the last 10 years, I've really found out about my attachments to how I look, right? Because my face is changing. I have lines and I've had to really embrace that. And that's part of, and as mums, we go through, like, our body changes, right? After we have kids, it changes when we go into perimenopause, it changes in menopause. We are constantly, as women, going through all of these different changes. And if we just brush them off with, I don't care and I don't have time for me, I'm not sure about you, but every time I've done that, my body has pulled me up. Oh my gosh, Lael, like the stories I could tell you, 6 months on a couch, bordering chronic fatigue because I simply didn't listen and I just kept going. Hospital with blood pressure of 230 over 180 because of the same. I've so often, my body has pulled me into line and said, Sarah, we will not be doing that. I think I'm lucky on that level that I keep getting pulled back into self because I literally can't physically misalign with myself to such a degree because my body doesn't let me. The people who come to me, they know that there's a sense of identity that they've lost as
Mm.
mums.
Yes.
What I get is women come because they know I don't do normal styling, right? They know that it's going to be an excavation into self and they're going to find themselves in the wardrobe, the parts that they embrace and the parts of them that are hiding. And so deep inside them, they know that there's some identities that have gone by the wayside and they're desperate to bring those back. So why do you think, as mums, and I mean, I'm a mum of two boys and I single parented the majority of their lives, and it's hectic, right? I get it's really hectic, but I'd love to hear from you across the board. Why is it that we lose ourselves and
Mm.
our own identity as a mum?
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, I think that on one level we're conditioned to be of service. So it is about the child and to put your needs behind. So I think that that's a big narrative that's been around for a long time, particularly caught up in the whole, and if you do that, you're considered a good mum. Another part I think is really interesting is that, and it's something I've been talking a little bit more about, and something that's only really being spoken about more now, is this concept of matrescence, which is when you become a mother, you go through a period of what's called matrescence, which can last for up to 7 years, and it may be longer. They're still doing research on it. And basically it is when you become pregnant and, we talk about your hormones change and, that is what helps you to grow a baby, birth a baby, and then you're in the postnatal period, but also your brain changes. And there are all these changes that happen in your brain, and they continue to happen in your brain from once you have a baby, and they can hang around for a long time. And those changes in your brain are things like being on more high alert, for danger for your baby. They are things like starting to have boundaries for the first time because you're having to be that lioness looking after her cubs. It can be a almost pruning of different things that didn't serve us before, that, allow us to move closer towards who we actually are in our essence. Now, the way that that's often framed is things like baby brain, or it's just like, you're really anxious, or maybe you're really depressed. But actually what's happening is this change is happening in our systems to prepare us for this next role. And look, I only really have learned about this in the last little while, and I've been working this space for a long time, right? So I'm like, hey, this makes so much sense as to a lot of the feelings I had when I first became a mum. And I remember very clearly there's this dance that goes on for a lot of women is we want to be a mum and care for our children, but at the same time, we mourn and grieve our life before that. We grieve that we can't just go to the shops when we want or go out to dinner. We grieve perhaps what our body used to look like. There's a grief that comes with this shift of what we move into. And the thing that I kind of want to just touch on is we're actually not meant to go back to what we were. We're actually meant to keep moving forward into who I am now with this whole new piece of me embedded in who I am. So, and you think about what we do as women right from the very beginning when we first start going through puberty and we start having our bleed and we go through menarche for the first time, the changes that happen, right? So we go from that little girl into moving into a fertile being, and then we kind of are in that maiden phase. And then from the maiden, we step into being the mother, right? So, and a lot of that mothering is about servitude on some level, but there are changes and stuff that happens. We become a lot more fierce. We become more protective, as I was saying. We become a bit clearer about what we want. We become a bit more skilled around a lot of things. And then we move through motherhood into perimenopause and menopause, where we move into that next phase. And again, a whole lot more change happens. So our brains change again, our bodies change again, and we're meant to move forward. And what do we see in this day and age too? Now, Sarah, you'll see this in perimenopause and menopause. The narrative is we should go back to looking younger. How do we stay younger? How do we go back to worshipping almost the maiden, because that's what our society worships? Whereas actually we're meant to keep moving forward, and each phase that we go through and each part of this is designed to actually, what I believe, bring us closer to the essence of who we actually are. And when we pull back and look from a bigger picture lens, most of us from the very beginning were taught to be very good girls. That has been the imprint. Let's talk about a global imprint for women from the very beginning. Be a very good girl. So don't get angry, don't get upset, put everyone else's needs first, be responsible for other people's feelings, be the good girl. And so you would see this, like so many women I've worked with over the years are just the good girl. And what happens in motherhood is they are learning to undo the good girl. They are learning to actually go, I'm going to have boundaries for the first time in my life. I'm actually going to take care of my needs. I'm actually not going to be responsible for my parents' feelings or keep my brother safe or, make sure my husband's okay. I'm actually going, what do I want? Where am I in this story? What makes me light up? Where are my passions? So all of these phases I think that we go through are designed to bring us closer to the essence of who we are. And because I think we were also conditioned to be a certain way, well, particularly in our society here in Australia, then what often happens in motherhood is just this massive chaos. We hold on to this, well, who was I before? What I was before was being told that I was beautiful in this way, or trying to find a mate by behaving in this way. Like, I just think we haven't had a North Star that's been the one that we should be looking at, because again, we're not surrounded by elders helping us know the path that we're meant to take. We judge people older than us for what have they got to say, when actually we should be sitting at their feet going, please tell us what this looks like. What is this? Guide us through this next transition. I mean, I look back to becoming a mother and I think what I needed back then was me now. I needed a mother, a woman to sit there and say, this is what it can feel like. These are the changes that are going to happen. It is okay to not like mothering. There's going to be days where you think this is just a really bad idea. And there's going to be days where you love it so much and your heart's going to just burst. And there's going to, that is very normal. And we're going to feel a sense of loss, and we're going to feel all these things as we are redefining. I mean, and even me going through perimenopause and menopause now, I've been going, show me a way to do this in a way that's really holistic and understanding. Do you know I found myself a menopause doula? I was just talking about this other day. There's a woman, she's the best in the UK, because I was just like, I'm hearing a lot of noise here from all different camps of the way you should do it and what it is. But I'm like, but no one's really talking about it in the way that I want to hear. This is designed for something deeper. I want to understand what it is. And I found her and I had a chat with her and I was like, oh my God, I need you to be a bit of a guide, to show me what it is, this powerful transition of what we're moving through here. And so this is a very long way to answer your question. But I think it isn't so much about, what we've forgotten and lost. It's like, where do we want to go? Where do we want to be? Who do you want to be? So we've made all these transitions, and yes, we lose ourselves in mothering. It's a huge thing. But I also think at the same time, we should be asking the question, but where do I want to stand? And what do I want to stand for? And what is important to me? And look, this is what I know, is that women will not often change out of love for themselves, but they will change for their children. And so, the question I say to mothers all the time is, what are the imprints you want your kids to have around self-care, around boundaries, around relationships, around food, around body image, around all the things? Well, they are watching you. They are watching you every moment. So kids can't be what they can't see. So what do you need to embody and shift and change and heal within you so that you can demonstrate to them what that actually looks like? So I think it's a big, beautiful, complex question that you're asking here. But I guess where I stand is I'm just like, this is a beautiful place where we get to just ask these questions. Well, who do I want to be? Where do I want to stand? What is this place I want to occupy? And, your work and the vehicle of your clothing, or the clothing that we wear, is just such a beeline into that question.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I love what you've just said about not going back to who we were or our perception. It's always our perception of who we were. And then, because for me, I always say to people, we don't need to find the new you. We just need to find the true you. Because that true you it's just buried under. And I don't believe our essence and our essence has changed throughout our life. But they do express in different phases of our life in a different way. And I think we're saying the same thing in what you've just said. It's like, as a parent now, what's really important for me in showing up for me? A good girl I see a lot in the wardrobes, and I know that imprints so well. Honestly, that was my, modus operandi for so many years and decades. And I really thought that losing that would have me completely unlovable. I thought that was my worth, really. And so to actually move across from that, and the same with women, and I see that in wardrobes a lot because it's all externally focused. Who do I need to be for this person? What do I need to look like for this person?
Yep.
And how do I fit in with this crowd? I remember one woman who used to dress down all the time because she said, if I go to a gathering or a party and I'm more dressed than others, like if I'm more dressed up than others, or if I look better than
Mhm.
others, then no one will speak to me, and I won't be lovable. And when we trace that back, it actually came down to a time in her teenagehood where she was going out and she got really dressed up, and her mum looked at her and said to her, "What are you all dressed up for? You think you're fancy?" Or something to that effect. And so she had that, she coupled looking great with lack of love. And that just carried, and this woman was in her 50s, but it had carried through her wardrobe the whole way through. And so she hadn't given herself permission. And then when she played small in the wardrobe, she was playing small out in her life as well. And it's just, oh my.
That story reminds me of many women that I have worked with over the years around even being feminine, particularly if they had a mother who was very masculine, who was very cut off from her own femininity, and being judged, shunned, told off when they wore something feminine, particularly in those teenage years when they were exploring that part of themselves. And exactly the same, they shut that down then. Many women will say, I won't ever wear a dress around my mum because
Mm.
it's so confronting. It's like my mother gets angry with me.
Oh my gosh. That is, yes, I see that a lot as well. And the shutdown of the feminine is probably one of the most common patterns I see in the wardrobe. It's like, and I think because we've come to celebrate masculine power so much, we've come to celebrate that action and outcome and achievements. It's a bit like self-care being like a luxury,
Yeah.
rather than actually it's something that keeps us in the best possible state that we can be for ourselves and our family, our friends, society, blah, blah, blah. But with the masculine power, it's like because achievement and because it's going out to work as such, a lot of people see it's like, how can I do? Because then I can be rewarded and I can actually document what I've done, which is what makes me powerful. Do you know, Lael, it's really sad that when I ask the majority of my clients, I will often say to them, what comes to mind when I say the word feminine? And do you know what the first word that comes up most of the time?
Weak.
Yes. Yes. Weak and then soft, but not
Yeah.
in a good way.
Yes. Oh,
And
I
I
hear
think
you. I
it's
hear you.
it's
I
yeah.
hear the same messages. Same
Oh
messages.
my
Yeah.
god, I bet you do.
Hmm.
It's fascinating. And when we cover ourselves up in, so certain clothes hold a lot of masculine energy, right? If we're um blazers, collars like I've got on today, if they're all done up, as we close side pocket pads, shorts, the traditional masculine clothes. Now, there's nothing wrong with wearing those because we do need some masculine in our outfit to hold it. But my golden rule is our masculine is there to hold the container for our feminine, but not to contain her. And
Yes.
yeah. And most of the time, we contain her in favor of the masculine because that's where we get rewarded. And we get
That's
rewarded
right.
externally, but we also reward ourselves on the inside because we've got a checklist happening. Well, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And there's nothing, you do get it? It's like,
Yeah, that was me. I mean, when you came into my wardrobe, I'm like, oh my God, that was one of the most confronting pieces because I'm like, I'm basically like a man. I'm like dressing in these ways that I thought was sexy, but actually it was just so much of this masculine stuff that was, and that was a big story that came up for me when we worked together was that it didn't feel safe in my being to actually stand fully in my feminine. I did a lot of speaking, to stand on a stage in my feminine and really own it. The only way I could do that was to stand there in my masculine with all these kind of, these clothes that I would choose that were hard and really structured. And, that was a really massive, like, piece for me of just like, whoa, okay, that's actually how you're operating. And when I started to shift and move that, it was really amazing what happened, not only in my career, but also for me as a woman. That really, really shifted in a huge way.
yeah, it was fascinating watching that because it's so mirrored. so many people, because when we come home to ourselves and we really embody those essences, and our feminine is part of that, like she's expressed through particular essences. And we think that it's scary, like you just described, and we use our clothes. I think what you've just said is like armor, right? So it's either really structured, or often like leggings, oversized tops is armor. It's like, I don't want anyone to really see me. And I often hear people saying, I need to be able to move in them. I had a client a couple of weeks ago and she said, no, well, I do need, like, leggings are the only bottoms that I'll wear. Nothing wrong with leggings if they fit into your style essences. Like, it's like, but are they truly connecting with the deepest part of who you are? And she said, no, I need to be able to move. And I said, okay, what kind of movement? Well, I need to be able to walk and climb trees. And she just, she rattled off all these things. And I said to her, when's the last time you climbed a tree? Probably when I was 5. It's just like the stories that we hold on to, right? About that practicality. It's like comfort. Do you
Mhm.
remember in your session where it was like, I just want to be comfortable?
Yeah. Yep.
But there is a difference between physical comfortability and emotional comfortability.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
most of the time, we're telling ourselves that emotional comfortability will be physical comfortability,
Mhm.
but it's not.
Mm.
And a lot of the time, people, once they start to move, say, you know what? Those leggings are kind of tight. They're not actually even comfortable. And it's fascinating,
It
because
is.
what we're doing is we're so wanting to come back to that comfortability in ourselves. So we overcompensate with the clothes that we wear, and we
Yes.
look for physical comfort, but
Yes.
we disconnect from that part of us that actually just wants to show up as ourselves in our clothes. And most of the time, and this has really come to fore over the last few years for me, most of the time, knowing who we are, when we try and do that through our clothes, our only reference points are social media, shop windows, magazines, celebrities, that kind of thing. It's like trends, because no one's actually gone deep enough to come under to go, oh, you mean there's an actual me that has its own blueprint of the style, and it's not dependent on a stylist coming in and saying where this is, which, by the way, they're just putting their own style essences onto you.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I hear it too as the deep, often wound and story that many people carry is just how scared they are to be fully seen. I mean, we want to be seen. Like, that's the whole thing. It's like all we really want, and this, I do a lot of work with people in their childhoods and, their wounds and traumas. And, it always comes back to just really wanting to be seen and heard as a child. That's what we all deeply crave. Yet at the same time, we're also really terrified of actually being seen in who we really are, because that story is, well, am I enough? Are you going to approve of me? Like, are you going to judge me? Like, it's really, no wonder we get frozen. No wonder we just go for comfort because we're like, this is scary.
100%. Going by what you just said, in that being seen, what I often see, and I wonder whether you come across this too, is people afraid of, like, there's always an essence, as I said, there's always an essence that's resistant on some level. Maybe I haven't said that, but there is a resistant, one that hides under the patterns, and one that's kind of normal to be seen. The resistance is often deemed as, I'll be too much.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you see that a lot?
Mm. I see that I'm too much if people have had that being told to them as kids. You're too loud, you're too big, why can't you just be quiet? So that often turns up for people that I think carry that as a wound. But also I think there's another side of that is not outshining others as well. So, having to play smaller to keep their sibling happy, right? So really dumbing themselves down or keeping hidden because their sibling has got, just used to get really loud if they had more, or there was jealousy or that kind of stuff. Or a parent, if they learned early on that, they're responsible for keeping their parent happy, then they also shrink themselves to keep that okay. So I think there's so many nuances around, there's stories around all of it. And And I guess the piece I always come back to is we make it mean what we make it mean.
Mm.
So in those moments as kids, we kind of went, whoa, in order for me to survive here, I got to keep my brother happy, or I got to keep my mum happy, or I got to keep my dad happy. So the way I'll do that is I'll be very good. I'll be a very good girl, or I'll be very quiet, or I won't ask for what I want, or I'll just take whatever I'm given. That is the way that I'm going to survive. And so then we just keep looking for evidence for that to be true. And then we just keep doing that. And then usually we grow up to be adults, and then we will find a partner, usually, who will also replay that story for us as well, keeping them happy a lot of the time. Or, we then just kind of keep bringing people into our lives that keep repeating these same stories and patterns until we reach a point where we go, this doesn't feel good anymore, or where am I at? We either get sick or something bad happens. We have a crisis on some level that makes us kind of shake it all up and then just go, where am I in all of this?
Mm, yeah, every time you bring out another pattern, it's like just that last one, I'm like, has she been reading my mind? Has she been reading my pattern? Because I know that part about playing small, not to upset
Yep.
siblings.
Yep.
It's like, oh my God. And one of my style essences is bold, for goodness
Yep.
sake. So it's like, okay. It just never worked very well. Every time I played small, it felt like I shrank.
Yeah,
And
of
it's
course.
it's that horrible feeling where we're almost, watching a shadow. I used to
Mm,
feel like I was watching a shadow of
yeah.
myself and
Yeah.
not myself, and it felt deeply disturbing to me,
Yes.
deeply
And I think
disturbing.
it's so important just
Mm.
to really touch on that what we do as children is never wrong. It is just protection. We're
Mm.
always coming from protection. It's survival. It's the clever parts of us as kids going, "Oh, how am I going to survive in this family? I'll do this." Or I'll behave in this way. So it's never wrong. It's not wrong. It's clever. And the challenge though is that we grow up and we begin to have these conversations of, does that pattern serve me anymore? Because now I'm actually an adult that has a voice, and I have a car, and I can leave, and I have my own money, and I actually have power, and playing small no longer actually serves me. Or keeping everybody else happy is not my responsibility and my job. I mean, like I say when I work with parents all the time, our goal in raising children is, and this is my personal goal, is to raise children that feel full permission to be the greatest expression of themselves. Like in raising my 3 kids, I was like, I just want you to be so you, whatever you is. I do not want any single part of you to think, what will mum and dad think? I better do this to keep mum happy or to do dad. I just want you to be the full expression of you. That is my mission. And if you are deeply aligned with who you are in your center, then you are going to go do life in that flow because you are going to be connected to yourself. Yet, I would say hardly anyone lives like that because of the conditions and the patterns we've had. And because we just, and bless our parents, they're doing the best job they know how. Like it's, no one's to blame. We're just a product of where we are. But I guess in what I talk about in wanting to parent consciously or talking to parents about parenting consciously, like this is the North Star that we're looking for here, to own our own stuff as parents. So firstly, we don't project it onto our kids. So when we get triggered, when we're having big reactions, we own it, we deal with it, we step aside and look at what our stuff is. We guide our children, but we keep inviting them to come back to the truth of who they are. We keep inviting them to use their voice. We keep inviting them to express what they need to express so that they then get to walk forward in this world, not carrying all the baggage that most of us carry.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And you just touched on quite a few pieces for me around the full expression of who we are. You talk about what I heard you say is, can we bring kids up so that they can be the fullness of them, right? And really know who they are and really express that out in the world. And yeah, our work is very similar. I just use the wardrobe to to find those pieces of the mums, right? Mum said to me, it was over the week ago or so, when I'd just done her wardrobe and we'd gone in, we'd found her essences. She's got a 3-year-old and she goes, there's a problem here. And I said, what's the problem? She goes, well, who's going to do this when you're gone? She goes, because I've got a 3-year-old, so we're probably looking around 20 years. Are you still going to be working at 80? And I said to her, maybe. But it is, I mean, and I get it's the North Star, but I think if we can give to ourselves that full expression, like to really honor and value that is important. I always say to people, we're one in, at the moment, 8 billion people. And we've all got our own energetic resonance. Like we're all who we are as individuals. There is no other Lael in energetic frequency, in Lael as Lael. There is no other Sarah in frequency, in energetic resonance. There never has been, there never will be. And so it makes sense to me that we've come here to be ourselves. And I think this life is really about lifting and being aware of those layers and walking ourselves home to who we are. And I think that coming home for me anyway, is that North Star. And look, I'm still a freaking work in progress. I always will be, right?
Yeah.
And we can have the best intentions and then find ourselves. I was going to a school reunion the other day, and
Ooh.
yeah. I actually wrote an email on it, right? I turned it into a blog post because it was fascinating. And I know what to wear, right? Like I've been doing this work for 30 years in the fashion industry. Like that's not an issue. However, all day I could hear this voice inside me saying, my God, I so don't want to go. And why am I either going? And it's cold. I'm tired, blah, blah, blah. And I was sitting on the couch and I was honestly in this complete indecision. Do I go? Do I not go? And it's because these two voices were fighting. So I did what I know to do. And I went to my wardrobe and I got dressed. Because I always know if I get myself in alignment in my clothes, then my decisions are easy because I can feel that alignment. But what I put on first, there was still this tailoring somewhere, right? And I hadn't fully embraced one of my essences, which is grace. It's like an effortless elegance, because I felt like I might be too freaking much. And so I was still kind of like, where am I? And so then I just went, damn it, just get all your essences on. I got them on, like cream patent boots, skirt, top, like, and all of a sudden I'm there and I was so in my 3 essences, grace, bold, sexy. And I was just like, all of a sudden that anxiety turned into excitement. I couldn't wait to get out the door because I just felt so me. But it's so interesting. It so shocked me that I felt that. But when I got there, here's the thing. I sat in my car just before I went in and I said to myself, what's my intention? Because I knew I'd had some anxiety. What's my intention? And it was like, I just want to show up with love. That's it. That's it. And I got in there and I hugged people with more love. I listened in a far more centered place. And I shared stories about myself with this group of women I had never shared before.
Wow.
It was a really healing. It was really, really healing. But I couldn't have done that, for me anyway, without getting my essences on, my 3, and just feeling grounded and centered in myself. Because otherwise, I don't know that I would have got out the door. I was that close to not going. So
It
I do.
makes so much sense. I mean, you tell that story and I'm like, the question I would have asked, like, and this is what I often do in my work, is who's here right now? And what I mean by that is, how old are you? So I'm imagining that if you had have asked yourself that question when you were in that part of you, probably would have been teenage Sarah.
It was
And
17. Yeah.
yeah, totally. It would have been teenage Sarah going, do I belong? Am I going to fit in? Is this right? Because you think about our teenage years are all about that. They're all about the do I belong? Do I fit in? And I think what's really fascinating is when we are in those places, and that makes complete sense because those teenage years are so pivotal. Like that is an imprint in itself, right? Those teenage years. It's such a good question to ask ourselves when we're in those places of like, what's happening? I know I'm not in my center and I'm feeling worried and anxious and on my head is just to go, who's here right now? Which part of me is here? Like, how old am I? Like I ask that question all the time. How old am I right now? Because if it's 5-year-old me, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm usually in protection somewhere. I'm in the, I don't feel safe. I'm not enough. What's this going to be? If it's me being a bit judgy or a bit like, kind of not smart enough, usually that's teenage me. Like, you begin to know these parts of you. And I think it's a really beautiful question to ask because it helps us go, okay, that's what's alive for me. What does she need? Now, I loved that you met that by I need to go and do what I know I do well, which is get dressed and activate the adult me. Because I'm imagining when you are, well, I'm not imagining, I know this. When you're in your essences, you're in the adult self. You're not in the child.
Yes.
And most of the time we operate out of, not most of the time, sorry, that's wrong. It's probably not wrong, actually.
Wrong, not wrong.
We operate from our child self and all the imprints and the stories and the patterns that are there. It's usually child us turning up, right? And our job is to catch that and be like, where's the adult here in this story and in this scenario right now?
Oh, I love that. How old am I right now? That's such a beautiful, simple question to ask ourselves in those moments. Yeah, I really, really love that. Well, I think we could talk for hours.
Yes, we
Well, I
could.
know that we could talk for hours, but I'm aware of the time and I'm aware of your commitments as well. So I want to thank you so much, so much for coming on. Your wisdom, your sense of naturalness, yourself, your sharing. Like it's really, you are a freaking gift to the world. And
Oh,
you're such a gift to the world. And I'm so fortunate to call you my friend, to have worked with you, to have like just been amongst your energy and your wisdom. So thank you so much for joining me and my listeners today.
oh, thank you, Sarah. And I have to say, like I say this, you coming over that day to do my wardrobe, which was one of the more confronting things I've ever done in my life. And I've done a lot of things, but it was such a pivotal game changer for me as a woman. Doing that work with you, uncovering it. And, we've revisited a few times and you've taken me shopping so gratefully, like many times. Like it is something your work stays with me all the time, all the time. And there's days where I kind of forget and, I'm pulling on the leggings. But then whenever I have really important things to do, not actually just the important things, I think about it all the time. What is missing from here? What essence am I hiding at the moment? Like it has been such a game changer for me as a woman, which has filtered into my work and to how I show up in the world. So I just want to say thank you for coming into my home that day and doing it for me because it really changed so much. And I mean, and I talk about you all the time. I've told so many people, you come and talk on my mentorship. Like I think what you do and what you offer is, I wish every person could experience it because it's so profound in what it does in helping us come home to ourselves. But more than that, it's inviting people to take up space and be the full expression of themselves. And as I said before, I think that's all that we deeply, deeply need.
So beautiful. I've just received that with such a huge heart. Thank
Mm,
you so much, Lael. I
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate
My pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode with the beautiful Lael Stone. If you've enjoyed it, please rate it 5 stars, leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your greatest takeaway was. And I'll see you in the next episode.